I saw something I shouldn't have at the old man's house. The dust devils danced across the cracked asphalt of our driveway, mirroring the unease swirling inside me. Dad had been gone 6 months. 6 months since the logging truck jackknifed on Route 33. 6 months since the bottom dropped out of our world. Mom worked double shifts at the diner, her face etched with a weariness that settled deep in my gut. I was 16, adrift, and felt like a ghost in my own life. Sarah, bless her heart, tried. She'd stop by with cookies, a forced cheerfulness in her voice that grated against the silence Dad had left behind. I knew she meant well, but I just couldn't pretend everything was okay. "Ethan, you gotta get out of the house," she'd said the other day, her brow furrowed with concern. "You're disappearing." Disappearing felt like an upgrade. Then came the flyer, nailed to the community board at the IGA, faded and curling at the edges. Yard work. Call Abernathy. The phone number was scrawled in shaky handwriting. Abernathy. The name hung in the air like a bad smell. Old Man Abernathy lived in that crumbling Victorian on the edge of town, the one swallowed by overgrown vines and shrouded in rumors. People said he was a hoarder, a recluse, maybe even worse. His family had vanished years ago, back when I was a little kid. The story was always whispered, never spoken aloud. Mom needed the money. We were behind on the electric bill, and the threat of disconnection loomed like a dark cloud. So, against every instinct I had, I called the number. His voice was raspy, like dried leaves skittering across pavement. "Abernathy," he croaked, no greeting, no preamble. I saw your flyer about the yard work," I stammered. "Come tomorrow, 8 o'clock. The line went dead. Sarah was horrified when I told her. "Ethan, are you crazy? That place is creepy. And Abernathy?" "People say," she trailed off, unwilling to voice the unspoken fears. "We need the money, Sarah," I said, the words flat and devoid of emotion. The Abernathy house was worse than I imagined. The paint peeled in long strips, exposing the rotting wood beneath. Vines choked the windows, casting the interior into perpetual twilight. The yard was a jungle of weeds, rusted tools, and forgotten junk. A child's tricycle lay on its side, its wheels frozen in place. It looked like the set of some low-budget horror movie. Abernathy was waiting on the porch, a hunched figure in a threadbare sweater and overalls. His face was a road map of wrinkles, his eyes milky and unsettling. He didn't say hello, just pointed to a rusty scythe leaning against the porch railing. "Clear the weeds," he rasped. "Burn them." The work was backbreaking. The weeds were thick and tangled, resistant to the scythe's dull blade. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. Abernathy watched me from the porch, his eyes unwavering. He didn't offer water, didn't speak, just stared. The first day was just weeds, mountains of them. I piled them into a rusted metal barrel Abernathy pointed to, and lit them ablaze. The acrid smoke stung my eyes and filled my lungs, but I kept working. I had to. The second day I started finding things hidden beneath the weeds. A porcelain doll, its face cracked and faded. A tarnished silver locket, its clasp broken. A photograph, its image blurred and indistinct. They were all old, forgotten, like echoes of a life that had been abandoned. I showed the doll to Abernathy. He snatched it from my hand, his fingers trembling. "Leave them alone," he hissed, his voice suddenly sharp. "Those are private." That night, I had a dream. I was standing in the Abernathy house, the air thick with dust and the scent of lavender. A young girl, no older than 6, stood before me, her eyes wide and pleading. She reached out to me, her voice a whisper. "Help us." I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding. The dream felt too real, too vivid. The next day, I found a journal hidden beneath a pile of rotting lumber. Its pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with Abernathy's spidery handwriting. The entry started out normal enough, detailing mundane events, the weather, the price of groceries. But as I flipped through the pages, the tone shifted, becoming increasingly erratic and disturbed. He wrote about his family, his wife, Martha, a gentle woman with a love for gardening, his son, Thomas, a bright and energetic boy. His daughter, Emily, the girl from my dream, a sweet child with a penchant for dolls. Then, the entries became fragmented, filled with paranoid ramblings about voices, shadows, and unseen forces. He wrote about needing to protect his family, about keeping them safe from the evil that lurked in the woods. The last entry was chilling. They are watching us. I must do what is necessary. The date was 10 years ago, the year the Abernathy family disappeared. I felt a cold dread creep into my bones. This wasn't just some eccentric old man. This was something else, something dark and twisted. I went to Old Man Hemlock, the town's resident storyteller, a man who knew everything about everyone. He lived in a dilapidated trailer on the edge of the woods, surrounded by stray cats and a collection of rusty lawnmowers. "Abernathy, you say?" Hemlock cackled, his eyes twinkling. "That's a name that'll curdle your blood. They say he went mad after his family left. Some say he killed them, buried them in the woods. Others say they ran off, couldn't stand living with him anymore." He leaned closer, his breath smelling of stale tobacco. "They say the land is cursed. That something dark resides there, something that drove Abernathy to the brink." I tried to talk to Sarah. I showed her the journal, told her about the dream, about the feeling of unease that had settled over me. She listened patiently, but her eyes held a mixture of concern and disbelief. "Ethan, you're grieving," she said gently. "You're projecting. You need to talk to someone, a professional." I felt a surge of frustration. No one believed me. They thought I was just a troubled kid, seeing things that weren't there. I even went to Deputy Miller, a weary man with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow. He listened to my story with a skeptical frown, then sighed. "Ethan, I understand you're upset, but there's no evidence of any wrongdoing. Abernathy is an old man, a bit eccentric, sure, but he hasn't broken any laws. And the Abernathy case, that was a long time ago. It's cold." He patted me on the shoulder. "Just stay away from the old man, son. Find yourself another job." But I couldn't stay away. I had to know. I had to find out what happened to the Abernathy family. That night, I snuck back to the Abernathy house. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, casting the yard into deep shadows. I crept along the edge of the house, my heart pounding in my chest. I saw him then. Abernathy. He was standing in the backyard, bathed in the flickering light of a bonfire. He was chanting something in a low, guttural voice, his arms raised towards the sky. He was surrounded by strange objects, bones, feathers, and what looked like dolls. I watched in horror as he pulled a small, wooden box from the fire. He opened it, and I saw something inside, something small and white. A skull. A child's skull. I stumbled backward, gasping. I had seen too much. I ran, crashing through the undergrowth, my lungs burning, my mind reeling. I had to get out of there. I ran until I reached the edge of the woods, then I collapsed, gasping for breath. I looked back at the Abernathy house. The bonfire still burned, casting an eerie glow against the night sky. I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to tell someone, anyone, what I had seen. I ran to Deputy Miller's house, pounding on the door until he answered, bleary-eyed and annoyed. "Abernathy," I stammered. He's doing something in the backyard. A ritual. I saw a skull, a child's skull." Miller sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Ethan, I told you to stay away from that place." But he saw the look on my face, the raw terror in my eyes. He relented. "All right, let's go take a look." We drove back to the Abernathy house, the patrol car's headlights cutting through the darkness. When we arrived, the bonfire was still burning, but Abernathy was gone. Miller searched the yard, his flashlight beam dancing across the overgrown vegetation. He found the bones, the feathers, the dolls. But there was no skull. "See, Ethan?" Miller said, his voice laced with disappointment. "Nothing here, just an old man and his hobbies." But I knew what I had seen. I knew he was hiding something. "Check the basement," I pleaded. "There's something in the basement." Miller hesitated, then reluctantly agreed. We went inside the house, the air thick with dust and the smell of decay. The interior was even worse than the yard, filled with piles of junk, rotting furniture, and cobwebs that hung like macabre decorations. We found the basement door hidden behind a stack of old newspapers. Miller pulled it open, revealing a dark and damp staircase. "Stay here," he said, drawing his weapon. "I'll go first." I waited anxiously at the top of the stairs, listening to Miller's footsteps echoing in the darkness. Then I heard him gasp. "Ethan," he called out, his voice strained. "You need to see this." I went down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. The basement was small and cramped, illuminated by the beam of Miller's flashlight. And what I saw there, I will never forget. The walls were lined with shelves, filled with jars containing things. Preserved organs, strands of hair, and other unidentifiable objects. In the center of the room was a table covered in blood-stained tools. And on the table, there was a skeleton. A small skeleton. A child skeleton. I screamed. Miller called it in. The dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. More units arrived, their sirens wailing in the night. The Abernathy house was swarming with police, investigators, and forensic technicians. They found more. Hidden beneath the floorboards, buried in the backyard, scattered throughout the house. The remains of Martha, Thomas, and Emily Abernathy. Abernathy was found hiding in the woods, muttering to himself about voices and shadows. He didn't resist arrest. He confessed. He told them everything. How he had become convinced that his family was tainted, that they were possessed by evil spirits. How he had purified them to save their souls. The town was in shock. The rumors, the whispers, they were all true. Abernathy was a monster. He was committed to a mental institution, deemed unfit to stand trial. But even behind bars, he haunted me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't escape the images that had been seared into my mind. The town didn't believe me. "You just had a bad time, Ethan. You helped capture a killer, Ethan." Some praised me, but I couldn't shake off how it felt that people had no idea the darkness I had seen in that house. I left town a few weeks later. I couldn't stay there anymore. The memories were too strong, the atmosphere too oppressive. I drove away, leaving the Abernathy house behind, hoping to leave the darkness behind as well. But I knew, deep down, that it would always be with me. As I drove, I glanced in my rearview mirror. I saw the Abernathy house silhouetted against the dawn. And then, for a split second, I saw him, Abernathy, standing on the porch, watching me leave. But it couldn't have been him. He was locked up, miles away. It was just a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination. Or was it? I sped up, pushing the car to its limit, desperate to escape the gaze that seemed to follow me. I drove on, into the endless expanse of the Ohio night, wondering if I would ever truly be free.